Hello, and welcome back to Raised by Giants, where we talk all things spirituality. I'm Ryder Lee. Tonight we have returning guest David DuByne from Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube, speaking about the perfect storm of events, how long until the collapse, and much more. But before I introduce him, check out Raised by Giants on Rokfin. It is a completely uncensored platform. Go over there, set up a free account, get all of my regular content I post here on YouTube, and sign up for Rokfin's premium content, which is far less than a YouTube premium account, at only $10 a month. And you'll get all of my premium uncensored content when it gets released, and all of the other creators' premium content as well, like Beyond Classified, Charlie Robinson, Jay Dyer, Zero with Sam Tripoli, Tinfoil Hat, Eddie Bravo, and Rex Bear Leak Project, and much more. Check the link in the description to sign up for the video streaming platform, Rokfin. Also, check out C60 Purple Power. It is the most powerful antioxidant on the planet. Helps with energy levels, skin problems, infections, eyesight, brain cognition, EMF radiation, and a lot more. It's a free radical sponge that gives your body the ability to heal itself. And if you use promo code GIANTS10 from the link in the description, you'll get 10% off your entire purchase. I highly recommend it. I've been using it for over a year with my own money, and I wouldn't recommend something that doesn't work. Tonight, we have returning guest David DuByne. David DuByne is the creator of Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube. He discusses energetic changes on Earth as the sun repeats its 400-year cycle of low activity, affecting global crop production, the economy, and everyone on our planet, with a timeline, what you can expect from now to 2030 as society resets. Hello, and welcome back to the show, David. Thanks so much for coming back on, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing as well as we can do in this chaos phase of the world that we're seeing. Yeah, it's been quite some time. It's been a fair few months since we chatted last. So just think, even the last time we talked, when you did your 100th episode, that was a great one with the six of us there in the round table. But how much has literally changed in just those few short months? And you look at it back then, and that was almost a completely different world. And we're just talking months ago, not even years.
Yes, I'm really excited to speak with you. We have a lot to talk about and cover here tonight, and hopefully we can cram it all in there in this crazy upside down unicorn fairy tale land that we live in, really. And like you said, things haven't gotten any better, which we kind of expected. Uh, and check out that 100th episode that I did. It was an amazing conversation. The audio was a little wonky on there, but things happen like that. But I guess where we can start out here tonight with David is, how did we get? I know this is a loaded question, but how did we get into this position that we're in? Right? How did we go from a fully functioning society, everything running smooth as possible, economically, socioeconomically, to having the highest inflation in history, food and energy crisis? Germany's having a crazy energy crisis right now. The UK is having a really rough gas prices at the moment, and unemployment as at an all-time high right now. So, did you see this collapse coming as quickly as it has?
Well, to answer the first part of the question, how did it happen? Well, if you knew the cycle, intensity, and the onset years of this cycle, which I talk about, this grand solar minimum 400-year cycle and low solar activity that affects crop production, meaning not enough food, starving people, angry people on the streets. It's a cycle. You go back through history, go back 2,000 years, 3,000 years in history, and then you can see this happens when there's not enough food. People overthrow the persons that are supposedly in charge, because if you can't provide the basics like food, then you don't have any right to sit in a position of power if our families are starving. Okay, so you understand that that is the catalyst for almost everything seen in history in the last 3,000 years was food. It's not about the economy went bad. It was because there wasn't enough food, which is the reason the economy went bad. Or why did one nation invade another nation? Well, they were looking for better food growing opportunities or ways if they couldn't work out with trade agreements through history. We're going to go in and take the best food growing lands for our people, because happy people with full bellies will do anything you say. So that's literally how it began is, with the research that I'd done and so many others, the onset for this grand solar minimum intensification to the point that it would be statistically measurable crop losses globally was right around 2020. And we got to that point, and now it seems like controllers are taking over to create the chaos, to give excuses for why the crops are being lost. Because you just can't go from zero, like you're talking about, fully functional society, just to the second, supply chains and systems to keep things moving across the planet, goods, services, repair parts, energy, whatever. It was all flowing at light speed. But how do you explain away suddenly that, we can't grow enough food to feed the planet? There's got to be some mechanisms in there. And the way you look at it, it's just everything's being turned off right now on purpose. Almost every distraction that you're seeing is going to get bigger as well. Because the closer we march to global famine and food shortages across all nations, including the United States in the future, we'll be the last ones to experience it here, luckily in the US. The world will be burning down around us before it comes here. But once it reaches to about the 100th country where there are food riots, you're getting precariously close. The United States is going to be following pretty quickly. There's going to have to be all these excuses, and the next excuse needs to be more grandiose than the last because the shock value is worn off. So, as we transit down from here through 2023 and 24, and this first wave of magnetic canceling on the sun, there's two waves that are coming with magnetic field anomalies on the sun that are now affecting our jet streams and our cloud cells, rainfall patterns that we're seeing on the Earth here. The first one's going to culminate at the end of 2024, right around October. And then it's an unknown what will happen after that point. Will magnetic fields stabilize? But it does show that there's a second peak in destabilization that will occur around 2028. I think once we run through both these waves of magnetic canceling and decreased magnetic field off the sun, also decreased magnetic field on our planet, more cosmic rays. There's a lot of things in play here. I think after that point, right around 2030, things should start to stabilize a bit more. And see, here's the thing. We're coming into this phase, the chaos phase is what I call it, where all systems would have broken down anyway. You just need to go back in history books and look how things have broken down and how fast they broke down based on prior cycles of this same 400-year grand solar minimum. And it'll run its course. We should be finished with it around 2030, and then watch how society be restructured, restabilized. Things that are unthinkable now in terms of breakdowns, so suddenly right themselves, and we'll start trucking along again like 2030, 2032. And they'll be like, see the chaos that was there. We have to have a global governance structure to control this, because look how much chaos these last decade was. We can't live through that again. We got to have a global currency, global governance structure, and everybody be on board with us. Great. But we're still in control. And by the way, central bank digital currencies, programmable money will be part of the mix too if they have their way. So that's why we're here right now. Do not delude yourself that this is in any way organic. These are all planned events to explain away. So we're pointing fingers at each other, not pointing fingers at truly the problem, which would be central banking and the elite and governance structures on this planet right now. Sorry to ramble on that, man. I just had a double espresso with ice cream earlier. I'm ready to go.
I got an energy drink right here, so I'm right there with you. So I was thinking about it because you brought up the grand solar minimum, and I was kind of thinking about this the other day, because we know that Bill Gates has talked about spraying particles into the air to block out the sun, right? To help with global warming. But we know that the planet isn't actually warming, it's cooling. Right. So could they actually use the excuse that as like a cover, that they sprayed these particles in the air to block out the sun? And the reason that they did that is why that we're going to go through this little mini ice age cooling of the planet, even though that it was going to happen anyway, because we know that they have to use excuses for everything and blame something else other than taking responsibility and letting people know actually what's happening. So do you see anything that they could, use that as an excuse to be like, oh yeah, we're going into this grand solar minimum, and the reason that we're going into it is because we sprayed these particles in the air to try and block out the sun?
And we are the gods controlling the weather, and you shall worship us as such. It's almost like we're reverting back into like the Sumerian eras or the Babylonian eras, where they want you down at the base of the pyramid on your knees, giving homage because they could, quote unquote, control the weather. But what if they're really doing absolutely nothing, making it appear that they're doing something, but it's all natural running course? Now, here's the scary thing. So we understand that geoengineering in turn is really, you see those lines in the skies and stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, and they even have a new term. So if you see these lines in the sky that they spray in the morning and they spread out, it's homogeneous cirrus. There's actually a real new name that they get. And here's the scary thing. They use the Latin, which means man-made cloud. So they've renamed it this last year. And it's actually a cloud in the cloud dictionary now. But if you break down the Latin, it means man-made cloud. The problem I have with this is, the Tonga eruption in January of 2022 was double, at least, the intensity of the Pinatubo eruption, which occurred in 1991. Now, if you're fans of history, 1991 and subsequent 92, Earth's temperature cooled 0.7 of a degree because of the particulates, the ash, sulfur dioxide, dust, that sort of thing from the eruption in the atmosphere. It was about a year later when the cooling started to happen. Well, now we had Tonga happen, 20 degrees south latitude, January of this year, 2022. It was at least double the height of ejecta into the atmosphere. And this time it also included water vapor. So just on a general sense, 25 miles into the atmosphere is where Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines had ejected ash into. So we'll give it even 25 miles. This Tonga eruption went up 52 miles. So it's literally more than double. So the amount of cooling impact should be measurably noticeable in about another 3 months in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, see, you're not really hearing about the Southern Hemisphere. And this was the presentation that I gave at the dairy conference that I went to just a couple of weeks ago. They're going into their planting season right now. And the maturing crops in the fields didn't really get to where they could be for any kind of noticeably large yields. Because after the eruption, that was placed in the Southern Hemisphere, and all the crop growing zones across South America, Australia, South Africa were already struggling anyway. There's a lot more, it's just dimmer down there because of the water vapor, volcanic ash, and the sulfur dioxide that blew up into the atmosphere. So now we're coming into the planting season, but the winter's really incredibly long-lived this year. They're still getting record snows, record cold temperatures, just blasting all temperature records kept in September out of the water, especially in New Zealand. It's a little bit higher altitude, a little bit further south. So some of these effects are being, amplified. And then you got these jokers putting particulates in the atmosphere. And this was one thing, and I must say, David Keith and the marauding bunch of atmospheric pirates that are around the planet, they had talked about a runaway worst case scenario of once they were to spray all this and, the particulates are up there, barium, strontium, aluminum, everything's reflecting, negating charged particles coming in from cosmic rays because of a weakened magnetosphere, that their main fear was that we would have a Tambora type eruption that would add all this extra ash into the atmosphere in addition to what was up there. 3 years is what they were looking at for anything to rain out. If they stopped their program after a VEI 7 eruption or a VEI 8, it would still take 3 years. And they were concerned about running into a global famine as fast as a freight train into a brick wall because they couldn't get the particulates out of the atmosphere. That's exactly what just happened in January. their worst case scenario, but they kept playing it off like, well, there hasn't been that large of an eruption since Mount Tambora in 1815. So the percentage of a large atmospheric eruption and, going up 50 miles plus well above into the mesosphere, that kind of eruption only happens once every 200 to 400 years, and it hasn't happened. So we're not even concerned about it. It's so far out of the statistical average of possibilities that we're going to run away and keep going with this whatever program of stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. Well, nature just flacked that trump card down on top of him and said, we're going to teach you a little lesson if you want to play God. Now you're going to have the wrath of the people because you're going to starve him. This is where it took a very drastically bad wrong turn when they're putting up the aerosols, and then we just had this massive eruption happen. So Southern Hemisphere is going to be absolutely knocked out at the knees in terms of crop production this year. And we're already looking at the grain corridor shutting down in Ukraine, stoppage of fertilizer exports, electrical shortages across Europe have shuttered almost every single chemical facility, which means no pesticides, no herbicides. And we're looking at literally like not a Six Sigma black swan event, but like a pond full of black swans in front of your front porch there, all swimming 50 or 60 of them at a time. This is where we sit, really, in the precipice of history. This is a civilization-changing event here, once on the order of 400 to 2,000 year magnitude that we are in the midst of experiencing. So just kind of frame it in context of that as to what's happening and what kind of distractions are going to need to be out there to distract away from everything I just described to you. So, Ryder, you might have a better, grasp of that. So everything I just talked about needs to have one distraction or series of distractions so the populace doesn't put it all together. So what would that distraction be, or series of distractions, do you think?
Well, if you look back through history, war is always the biggest distraction that they can possibly do. And that's what they've done almost every single time. And they take us to war, and then they blame everything on the war. And that could be a blame for the food shortages. It could be, a blame for more people passing away, and it's really something else. But it's interesting that you brought up the Tonga explosion, the volcano explosion, because I feel like a lot of people forgot about that, right? And I had a guest on the other day, and she was talking about how volcanoes are the largest producers of carbon on the planet. And I was like, I don't know about that. So I researched it. I looked it up. I did all the math. And between active volcanoes and inactive volcanoes, they produce 645 million tons of CO2 carbon per year, right? So then I looked at a printout of all the countries that produce carbon yearly. The latest data that I could find that had a list of all of them was from 2016, but it doesn't really fluctuate that much from year to year. China is still number one producer of carbon with 10 million metric tons, and the US is number two at 5 million. And when I added all of these countries together, which took a long time, it took me a couple of hours to get through all this, it roughly produced, all the countries in the world produce little over 41 million carbon a year, right? I calculated
1 million tons of CO2.
Yes, 41 million tons of CO2 is produced from all the countries in the world combined.
And volcanoes, 600 million.
645 million tons of carbon per year. So in reality, volcanoes produce more carbon in 1 year than humanity does in 15 years. I was mind blown. I was like, holy crap. And when you look at all the numbers, you're like, oh, you start calculating. I calculated them just right off the top of my head. And I came to something, when you look at it, you're like, holy crap, this is insane. Right. And they're, complaining about the humanity is the worst producers of carbon on the planet, when that's not true. Right. So it was unbelievable when I added them all together. I was like, wow. And I did that specifically just for this talk, and I took all the time to do that. But yeah, crazy.
That's probably not a statistic that's in the yearly handout for the short version for journalists and researchers and government officials now, is it?
It's not, because they claim that humanity produces, I forget how many trillions of carbon a year, but it's not
It couldn't
true.
be trillions.
Yeah, that's what they say, because I Googled it. And I was like, how much does well, I mean, Google, Google is whatever, but I Googled it, and I was like, because I was trying to just look up to see, how much volcanoes produce just from the Google search, and then how much humanity produces. And I read this article where it was like, yeah, volcanoes produce up to six, what was it? What did I say?
40.
45 million tons of CO2 per year, and then that humanity produces like in the trillions. And I was like, no, there's no possible way that that was right. And then that's whenever I looked at the printout of all the different countries, and China is the number one producer, which is 10 million, and then the least producer is Greenland at like 1,755, I believe, which there's nothing in Greenland anyway. So yeah, it was really interesting when did the math and put them all together. Incredible.
Well, they could come to trillions if they were to use a different measurement than tons. If they were to use ounces or pounds to try to get that super gigantic number, because there's a really good book a lot of people need to read. It's called Lying with Statistics. Like, we could come up with the same tonnage number, Ryder and I, but I could frame it in ounces and give this super gigantic number that would stick in your head because it was so big, But then, we're still comparing sort of an apple to sort of an orange. It's the same substance. It'll be the same weight, but the way we calculate the weight in terms of the units of the weight will be different. Yeah. And you could, that's where I think we're getting into, is somehow these, IPCC's yearly reviews or whatnot that they give out to policymakers, perhaps they're measuring in ounces or pounds, because getting up into the trillions, that's the only possible way. Because, 1,000 millions is a billion. So you'd have to have 1,000 billions to get into the trillions. So where do you carve that up from? You got to bring it down into grams or something. I don't know. It was a 28 ounces to or 28 grams to an ounce.
What I seen that they were doing, they were just adding 3 zeros at the end of every number on the statistics. So you have to take off the 3 zeros, because if you were looking at it like it was, because if you were to calculate it the way that they had it printed out, then it would be in the trillions. But when you look up the highest carbon producers on the planet, it'll tell you millions. And so you have to take off the 3 zeros at the end of the printouts that they're giving you. Because if you were to do it like that, then the way that they're presenting it, it would be 10 trillions of carbon produced by China and 5 trillion carbon produced by the United States. So you have to take off those 3 numbers at the end.
This is all kind of marching us toward forced climate lockdown. And when I say that, it's just literally you're not allowed to use the energy, and there can be zero emissions from you on this day, this month, or whatnot. And your energy is restricted. And that's exactly what we're seeing across, the developed nations of the planet at the moment. Europe being number one. I mean, they're being forced onto rationing whether they want it or not. And you saw the whole planet during 2020 and 2021, the way it was shut down, whether you wanted it to or not, how many small businesses, whatever. But you saw those emissions drop off. And really, after all that time, it was just such a blip that it was almost unregisterable on how much it declined, even though the world's entire business structure shut down for almost 2 years. It was barely measurable in terms of parts per million that dropped off after all business was stopped. So then you come up into this. All right, well, maybe that was a litmus test to see, would people voluntarily stop doing business for carbon lockdowns, or would they not? So that probably no for most countries. So what's the next option for, mandatory this or that. Well, it's going to be forced rationing. Like those in Europe have no choice on how much electricity they're going to get. They're going to be with their little begging bowl going, please give us enough just to keep our homes warm enough so we can sleep and not freeze tonight. That's really scary when you're talking about developed economies like Germany, France, this sort of thing, right in the middle of going into winter, and they don't have enough power for their citizens, or they're saying you can't turn on your heaters from, I think it was 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. to the next morning. Like these kind of things are happening. And if you do, then they're going to come and arrest you and fine you. And what kind of world are we moving back into? It's kind of are we going back to serfdom, do you think? I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, Ukraine is telling us that there won't be any winter wheat or corn for the winter. So you couple that, which makes me think that this war in Ukraine was definitely contrived to a certain point, because Ukraine is the biggest supplier, the largest export of wheat to Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, right? Which I believe Ukraine has exported, I believe, 90% of their wheat for this marketing year. I'm not too sure on the numbers. I looked it up last week or something like that. It might be more or less, which is, it's cool for the rest of the year, I suppose, but it's not looking good for the last, next year. So it's like, well, where do these countries that are importing grain, where are they going to get their grain? When, they said that, there won't be any wheat or corn for the winter. So we're in a really big bind. And then, the UK is also warning of blackouts as well, and is kind of getting hit with a energy crisis. Well, not really an energy crisis, more of a gas crisis. The price of gas has risen astronomically in the UK, and you have to have that to heat your home, and then couple that with the blackouts for 2 to 3 hours a day. I think starting in January, I believe. I think you know more about that than I do.
Ukraine said there will be no winter wheat.
Yeah.
We're not going to plant it. So if you're looking at the numbers of what got planted this year in a regular just year, they would have 100% of field space that would be planted in Ukraine. Well, this year they only planted 30% of that. So the yields of the harvests that are coming out that are going to be harvested this year, really just in the next, literally now, and in the next months or so, it would only be 30% of what their total 100% yield would be anyway. So they were down 70%. Another thing about what you're talking about marketing year exports, they generally would export somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 million tons, somewhere 15 million on a really good year. They were the largest exporter of grains in the world outbound. This year, they're pushing 8 at best. So the problem was that they had a lot of storage capacity full still. They're trying to bring in this new crop. So what they're finding is, with the war, their crop storage was suffering. They didn't have the persons on site. There's been a lot of damage, wet damage, insect damage, pest damage. They didn't really maintain the facilities at the normal rates that they would have an overseership to store those grains properly. So what they're finding, there's a lot of grain that can't even be sold. Like a lot of it didn't even pass EU inspection for animal feed. So then they were looking for these like tertiary, third, fourth, fifth markets of anybody that does take anything because their people are starving. And then they send it out and they give themselves a pat on the back like they really did something special for the world. That was the animal feed that you couldn't sell into Europe that you wanted to give to Sudan, to the South Sudan. Come on, really? And these are the kind of little tricks that are being played with the statistics over there. So what they're looking at here is when they bring in the new grain in, some areas they can't actually move it to a good storage facility because the rail lines are blown up, and there's been a huge bunch of new attacks over there. Russian forces taking out their infrastructure. So they're really limited on where they can put any new harvest. And what they're finding is, okay, maybe we scoop it out and we put the new stuff in, or we just pour it in the sea because we can't export it. And at least we got the new storage space for the new crop that's coming in. Like they might talk a big game and, they're up to 8 million tons, but you're still down from 14 last year. Now what? Where's all that grain coming from? And then these downright scary, pronouncements and announcements from the grain councils and the agricultural minister out of Ukraine itself. There's no corn, there's no winter wheat coming. So then next year, what happens? Kazakhstan is still on their 6-month grain embargo. Kazakhstan is in the top 10 of exports of wheat as well. And Brazil said they're going to keep all the soy in the country because of the third La Nina, cool weather, cool waters off the Pacific, that they anticipate more drought. So they figure that if there's more drought, especially in Argentina, they can't grow enough wheat. So Brazil's out on the market looking to get more wheat that they can't actually import from Argentina because of the drought. So now Brazil's going to hoard and keep the soybeans in the country, knowing that they're going to get a higher price because of the drought. So they're going to take it off the export market to try to purposely drive price. And these are the shenanigans that are going on when we're heading into a global famine, crop losses, food shocks, and food crisis. And this is the games they're still playing out there. This needs to stop. It really does. We need to feed the planet. And just right now, there won't be enough food, especially in these crop forecasts for the Southern Hemisphere. We're looking at some reduction of 50% on their normal grain production. And that'll be for this year coming into the planting season as we speak. But they still can't plant because it's too wet and too cold. So where does that? They should have been planted already. They should be well into the, teens, high 20s, maybe 30% on planting, but they're remaining around zero at the moment in many countries. So something's gone terribly wrong in the Southern Hemisphere. So, and that, swirl all that together and
where was it, Germany or the UK that said that they were going to import their grain from Canada in the United States? That was just opened up the other day, wasn't it? I can't remember what country they said that it was from.
Well, I didn't hear that, but I will say one thing. The Mississippi River is at near all-time record lows, and the guys that really do shipping and logistics and grain shuttling and this kind of thing, we're saying that the Mississippi River is going to be locked up super glued tight until April because the weather system's coming in. Once it gets a little cooler and that starts to be snowpack, not any kind of rain, plus there's drought everywhere, that they wouldn't expect any kind of like raising of the water table there or the water depths until April. So the only way possible that Canadian grains are rolling over to export bound nations is on rail out to the port. They're not shipping anything downriver there. And, Canadian grains coming out of the Great Lakes, so if you're not going to be taking it by barge, you're going to be limited because rail space is so incredibly tight right now. You have no idea. These grain shippers in the States, they're buying out forward like 12,000 tons a week on rail line capacity, and they get cut 20%. Oh, we just don't have the cars anymore. Wait, we just paid you how many umpteen millions of dollars for rail space, guaranteed money in your pocket for revenue, and you still cut us 20%? There is a huge bottleneck on rail cars at the moment, to the point it's causing chaos in deliveries, where they're out in Ohio now looking for corn when they would normally get it from somewhere further out west, like Kansas, northern Texas, but that they can't get it there because they can't get rail space, and there's the drought, and it's reduced production of something like 700 million bushels this year in America. So, dairy people are running over to Ohio to get grain shipped out to California, but they can't get the rail space. So even Canada, since it's the same rail network running amongst the borders here, they could get some out, but it's going by rail out to the port, and it's extremely constricted right now. So I would love to get that article and get my hands on it, which you just spoke about, on who's expecting grain deliveries out of which ports. That'd be a good one to read.
Yeah, I think I can't remember where I read it, but I think one of the countries is expecting imports for out of Canada in the United States. And the thing is exactly what you're saying, is how, and that we use the Mississippi River because it's the most economically feasible to transport all the grain through the Mississippi River. And then what happens when the river is too low, which you're right about the drought there, and what's going to happen when you can't get them. I think that I'm not sure on the number, but I think there's like 2,000 barges backed up right now on the Mississippi River. Do you have a more accurate number than that?
Well, it depends. It's the tugs that are pushing the barges. That's the number that the Coast Guard goes off of. And just to put it in a reference here of size, each one of those, as Ryder's talking about, just one grain shuttle, one barge, holds 70 18 wheelers full of grain in just one of those. So to even be able to fathom taking it off a barge and get it onto a rail car, or taking it off a barge and putting it on trucks to move it around, it's just literally physically impossible. A, the manpower is not there, and just the actual logistical space, free space to do that doesn't exist. And the number of semi drivers and having those commercial driver's license, that those guys are just dropping off left, right, and center, just retiring, quitting, not showing up, sick one day. Who knows? But the driver fleet is extremely reduced as well. So put that in perspective. Let's use your number 2,000. Not again, Coast Guard will go on the number of tugs that are pushing. So it might have one tug pushing 20 shuttle or 20 barges down the river there. So if you're talking 2,000 of those tugs, then that's an astronomical number. But even just leaving it at 2,000, multiply that by 70, and that's how many, you're looking at just huge amounts of grain. And that doesn't even include those barges that are stuck in the mud that can't get loaded, because you go off the Mississippi and there's all these side channels there where they take those same grain barges, load them up into the side channels, and most of the grain loaders are off there, and then they push them back out to the main Mississippi channel again once they lash them together. Well, those are all completely non-functional at the moment. I was reading some incredibly in-depth articles. These guys go, man, my grandfather started this company 80 years ago and we've never had it this bad before, ever. So whatever's going on is something so far outside the magnitude of normalcy that it's really paralyzing the grain industry and our ability in America to export grains outbound or get farm inputs coming in like fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, which we don't produce in America anymore. So reliant on all these imports and exports, and we're just caught in the middle. We're just stuck, literally stuck in super glue right now.
Yeah, it's really a genius plan, was to move all of the productions and production of crops, production of fertilizer, all this, to other countries, and then export it to other countries. Because it's kind of like what you were talking about earlier, that America is going to be one of the last countries to be hit hardcore. And that's the genius part about it, because whenever it comes to America, we're not going to have anybody else to turn to, right? Because we don't manufacture a lot of our own stuff in America anymore. And then when they've moved it to other countries, they can control other countries, and other countries will do what we basically tell them to do, or we do it by force. That's been the way that we've always done it. A country doesn't like what we want to do, and we go in and invade, or we take over in some kind of capacity. So it was genius operation for them to do it that way. Take all the producing, the plants, the manufacturing, move it to other countries, and shut it down in other countries, so that we're just kind of stuck on this island in the end. And when everything, all these problems, when we see the effects of all these problems finally hit the United States, there's not going to be anywhere else to turn to. We're going to be stuck.
On a positive note, the second largest deposit in the Earth's crust for potash sits between the Canadian and the American border. So number 2 on the entire planet of fertilizer reserves is up on the Canadian-American border. Now, could we get that and utilize it? I mean, Mosaic had some problems after Hurricane Ian. That was, the main producing area for, what you consider mining of fertilizers, taking it from a rock and chipping it into flake or chip, and then, putting that in a bag and sending it onward. Could we get it together again and start a new manufacturing base here in America? And if yes, how long would that take? Because if you're going to weigh this out, you start going to these food shortages, people are going to want to make money off that. There's going to be huge opportunity, and nobody's going to sit twiddling their thumbs when they could make billions or hundreds of billions of dollars if they could get infrastructure in play again, old disused factories up and running again, whatever, refurb a plant. But how long is that going to take in comparison to how long the food shortages are going to run? At some point, there's going to be some real catalyst beside, some fires under the butts here to get people moving into action, because there's money on the table, sad as that sounds. But, how long do you think it might be before something could evolve back and we get sort of a resurgence again of American-made production? And people are going to have to start working for less money. But again, if we come into a hyperinflationary event or fiat currencies don't, not fair trade across the planet anymore, nobody accepts anybody else's monies. At that point, then what your understanding of $1 is, or you $20 an hour, $30 an hour to do something, that'll all shift also. And maybe we'll go back into you're getting paid in silver coinage for the day's work or whatnot. But wages are going to have to significantly shift if we're going to be at all competitive enough to even feed ourselves, because you can't have somebody demanding $50 an hour to go dig into a potash reserve when the world's starving and our economies are in full collapse. Like, that the perception of what you get for doing a task is going to shift here. It's already in the process of shifting. But when it really hits it here in the States, how much will people be willing to bend before they starve is the question.
And then the inflation too. I don't know if it's so much that there's an actual shortage of a lot of these products. I think it's just becoming super expensive for us to buy, right? The natural gas is becoming ridiculous, and you need natural gas to make fertilizer, right? And even the farmers in the United States are spending double and sometimes triple the amount of money that they were just spending 2 years ago. And the reason for inflation is because of the endless money printing that we've been doing for a really long time. That's completely wrecked everything. I believe wholeheartedly that the money supply has caused a lot of these problems, especially when it comes to inflation. Right when you just endlessly print money, which that's what we've been doing since the end of 2019, and spending billions of dollars and aiding other countries. That's really the definition of inflation, right?
That's why nobody wanted the gold standard. That's why they wanted to take us off. And I should talk in Nixon in the 1970s. The gold standard decoupling allowed that money printing to happen. Like, we wouldn't have this inflation if we were still backed by gold and on some sort of metals system. And you talked about invading countries. I mean, Iraq, Saddam, he wanted to move over to take euros for oil payment. And you look at Gaddafi, he wanted to have a gold-backed currency also for oil payment, agricultural payments, and everything else. But see, I love that movie, The Ants and the Grasshoppers. I forget the name of the movie. It was an animated movie, but they
Life.
portrayed it. Yeah, Bug's Life. Portrayed it so well that they were like, well, it won't matter if it's just one ant. And that one mean grasshopper, like the leader, goes, if even they understand, if it's one, it turns into 100. And once they understand, then we are finished and our way of life will be taken from us. And they were talking about them being the ruling elite. It's the same thing. Once that first country starts to understand and put it out there that, hey, a gold standard means no inflation, real wealth, dynastic wealth will stay with your countries based on sound value money. What if it was a second country, then the third? Well, now the BRICS evolves out of that, taking the same principles, and they're just really angry at the states now. So, in terms of dollars, I definitely see hyperinflation heading into the states here. Maybe not tomorrow, but as Ryder and I sit here through these next 2 years, we are going to experience something hyperinflationary that Weimar Germany had experienced. All these dollars are going to come flooding home. Nobody's going to want the dollars. Once they get the BRICS truly up and running, where there's a gold-backed standard behind it, this paper system that America just has, the printing press running, will have zero value, literally zero value in the eyes of anybody, when I could walk over and take a new brick note and put it on a bank and get the actual physical gold across the counter. And that's what they are planning. The way it used to be here in America. Before they confiscated gold in 1933, you could take your note, the gold certificate, and silver certificates and put it on the counter in a bank, and they would actually give you the physical piece of metal equivalent across the counter.
Yep.
Well, that's what the BRICS are going over to right now. That's why they've been buying so much gold, why it's all shifting eastward, why they're giving arbitrage opportunities like $45 over the price that you can get at the LME, because they want all the gold. They're willing to trade the worthless paper right now to get the physical gold. So if I got to spend an extra $45 to get an extra ounce of that physical shiny gold stuff over into Asia, I will pay you 55 worthless or 45 worthless US dollars that are just toilet paper at the moment to make sure I can get that physical piece of metal. And this is where the BRICS currency has gone to. And not a lot of people are coming back to the redemption side of things, where individual citizens are going to be able to redeem over the counter in participating countries in that new BRICS gold system physical metals. America will be lost at that point. And if it went up to 100 million US dollars for one of the new BRIC currency, it would not even surprise me. I mean, you look back in history, these numbers are astounding, from Zimbabwe to Venezuela to anywhere in the past that you would look in hyperinflated currencies. What if it went to just 1 to 1,000 here in America? How devastating that would be. What if it went to 1 to 100? That would still be society-ending event for America. But going into 1 to 10,000, 1 to 100,000, 1 to 1 million is generally where it rolls off to. And if we ever hit that point where you need $1 million US in the bank to get one equivalent dollar of the new BRICS money, then our country will really collapse until they get the money back up and running again, backed by something that we all agree that will have value. And it sure ain't going to be a digitized forest or a digitized fishery offshore, because I don't consider that value. Banks might, but unless we all have something that I can walk up to Ryder and slap something in the hand and go, all right, here, I need your service. Or you could walk up to my farm and go, well, here's a piece of silver or gold, boom, in the hand. Here's your grain, here's some apples, whatever it is. And until that time comes, then it will never reset properly. And we'll be off in some, black hole land of just never ending zeros stacking up behind the money value of our exchange rate over here. And believe me, it is coming. So one thing to prepare for, if anybody, get metals now, because less than 1% of people in America have any precious metals. Less than 1%. That is going to be the thing that will save you and give you dynastic wealth, or even carry you through this, so you can purchase lands of people who might have it swooped from the bank, and then help them stay on their property to help you during this time of just complete implosion. So yeah, I have some silver. I'm going to buy my neighbor's farm. If the banks come down to swoop out their farm and kick them off the land, I'm going to smack the banker in the face with a bar of silver and go, they're keeping their land. That's my land now. They're not moving anywhere, and they're going to stay and farm that. Now you get the hell off. That's kind of the way it's going to be. I'm going to be using some of my, metals to be able to help neighbors stay on their property. And that's the way we all need to think, because if we all did that, then you would own the properties outright. It'd all be backed by metals, and these banks could just jump off a cliff because they would have no power over anybody with your usury and their interest payments. Flip the tables.
Absolutely. I agree with that. It's interesting that you're talking about how these countries, throughout history wanted to get off of this, Federal Reserve kind of money and get it backed more by gold, right? And something physical and something tangible that you can walk into the bank and then get that tangible thing, because it sat on the money. My grandma had some old money, and it literally said on there that you can go into the bank and exchange this money is exchangeable in gold, right? Which meant that you can go to the bank and exchange that money for an actual piece of metal. But I had heard back in like 2014 that, I mean, this is just, a conspiracy theory or whatever, but that China was getting ready to create its own gold-backed currency with all the gold that they had in China, right? And that was I heard this back in 2014, and it was supposed to roll out by 2020. Right? And look what they did to China, right? They had the boogity boos come out of China, so that just completely collapsed their entire plan right there. So I don't know. It's really interesting. And then also, we were talking about before the show, the because I've been listening to your mini Ice Age conversations on your other channel, phenomenal conversation that you're having over there with Mr. Godwin, and you were talking about, because we know that Bill Gates has purchased up a lot of the farmland in the United States, and it was really interesting to me because I looked at all of the 145 food processing plants that's been burnt down in the last of 2022. Some were burnt down in 2021 as well. But when you look at the map of all of the food processing plants that's been burnt down in the United States, and then you look at the map of the farmland that Bill Gates has purchased, it looks strikingly similar. And then you were talking about on one of those shows with Mr. Godwin about how it's not even so much about the farmland, it's more about the water rights. And that blew my mind too, because I'd always been told my whole life growing up that whoever controls the water controls the world. And I don't think that people realize how valuable water is, because we've kind of taken water for granted, right? But we use water for everything in our lives, right? We use water to cook with. That's the most essential part. We use water to shower with. We use water to wash our clothes with, you know? So if you don't even have the rights to the water, then that means that someone can turn it off, they can restrict it, they can do whatever they want with the water. So I think that the water is another problem that we really need to be looking at, and especially if that was the biggest reason for Bill Gates purchasing all this farmland, wasn't just for the farmland, it was also for the water rights.
Or water rights were number one, and it just was on farmland. Because if you look at Chile, one of the big things they had with they're trying to get a new constitution, but they're having some massive, massive riots down in Chile. One of the things they're trying to enshrine in the new constitution is non-guarantee to water rights for farms at all. None. All private. You buy it from a private company. Your right to water is going to be removed. And that's one of the reasons that they were so angry, and still are. And they have the right to be, that it was enshrined before that. Yeah, you have the right to the water that's coming to be able to grow food for this nation. Farmers had that right coming off of a hillside to collect that for their farm usage. But it seems that what they're trying to pen into the new document down there is you don't have that right, that if it falls from there, it will collect somewhere, very much like the Oregon law, where you can't collect water from your roof, any rainwater from your roof, because eventually it will end up in the watershed, and that watershed would be sold off the rights. Well, they're trying to do something very similar, but on a countrywide basis here, even streams coming down off of mountains. So, I could see why Chile is super angry about that, and they should be. But you come into the States, and we have all these different laws within the States on either surface water or subsurface aquifer water, how deep you can drill your wells, how many wells you can plunk down on certain, sizes of land. And there's a lot of regulation in terms of what you can take out of the aquifer, how quickly it's being replenished, what are the above ground water resources that are replenishing. But Gates has seemed to find these pivot points where either it's the pooling area, which Deborah Tavares talks about primary water. Those areas have been mapped out, and magically the farm purchases seem to be riding on those zones. Or it would be where above ground water resources are starting to come into pool in what you consider the beginning of the river system, in terms of all these tributaries that flow into what's now considered a river, that it controls that farmland too, where those tributaries are all coming to coalesce into one moving water body. Now, to be able to control that and control the water rights downstream for all that, that's some serious power in a hand of one individual. The way water rights are structured currently, like in the Constitution, there's not an enshrined right for you to have water rights to your aquifer. That comes on a state-by-state basis, and what your mineral rights are, and how these different states, you notice there's a whole handful of states that there's no farm purchases in. That's because if you do the work and look at the laws that give you rights to the aquifers, there's no way that he would be able to control that water resource as tightly as other places like Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington. There's some freewheeling states that are still like, water's everybody's right. It's not in a constitution or a state constitution, but it sure isn't. Like, the person who goes over your land, you still have to give them a usage fee just because it transited through their property. You have to give them like 1 cent per acre foot or $1 per acre foot or something. There's laws like that all over the United States. Like, just because that water moved through your property, it's much like an oil or gas pipeline. Those companies that are going to move how many cubic feet of gas across your land. Like, my aunt has one of those pipes on their property up in Ohio from tons of gas up there. They get paid every month just some royalty check because they said, yeah, you can put a pipe across. It's a transit pipe. Every cubic meter or whatever they're determining the value up there, but they get paid every month. It's the same thing because they're using transit rights. So the same thing with the water. The water was going down the river ran through your property. So that farmer that's, 35 miles down there is still going to have to pay 1 cent an acre foot for every acre foot that's rolling through that they use on their calculable usage. And, you might think 1 acre foot, that's a huge amount of water. That's really 1 acre squared by a foot deep, like a whole family in America would maybe use 2 acre feet in a whole year, maybe 3. But when you get into agricultural, they're using thousands, tens of thousands, millions of acre feet per year here in America to irrigate fields and whatnot. And heaven forbid you talk about the ability to drill wells or not. Like Arizona is a real famous case study where, they let the Saudis come in and drill as deep as they wanted, take as much aquifer water as they wanted. So me or our families, we might have had our family farm up and running since the 1920s, and our wells are down at like 1,000 feet. Well, it's just scraping where the water table would be. And then the next well that would be drilled and like, a decade or two later would have to go 500 feet deeper because the aquifer had, drained out and actually those wells had run dry. So when the Saudis are coming in there to grow alfalfa, and they're just bailing it up and sending it back to Saudi Arabia. It's not even for sale. It's a private operation and then they're drilling down 2,000-foot wells and pulling as much water as they unregulated. Just pull it as much as on your land, drill deeper than your neighbor. They're going to run dry, but the deeper that became the race is how deep the wells will go to be able to access that aquifer basin there. Whoever has the most money to drill the deepest well wins because and then they were just pumping, like spraying out. They didn't even care. There was no try to water management. Or there's just circle out in the middle of the desert and there's bountiful sunlight. Who cares about the water? It comes from the aquifer. We can drill a deeper well. But all that alfalfa production baled, containerized, and sent out of our country. So these are, then you got to go a state by state basis and look where Gates is set up with all these things. It's very, very farmer who owns the water friendly laws, let's say. I'll leave it at that. Heaven forbid we talk about lobbyists. I'll leave that one out of the conversation for now.
Yeah. What was the excuse that they used that? Because I think it's almost illegal everywhere in the United States to collect rainwater. I mean, I'm sure there's some exceptions in some states, but I think they said that you couldn't collect rainwater anymore because the rainwater was polluted. And how could it get polluted, right? That would be from cloud seeding and geoengineering, right? Which I don't know how much truth. That sounds like an excuse to me. Oh yeah, you can't collect rainwater now because it's polluted, right? It's got too many chemicals in it, and all that. I think they started that back in. I know that you can't collect rainwater in California. I know it's 100% illegal to do it there, but it's a perfect excuse for people not to collect water. It's poisonous, right? Can't drink it.
Well, I had a little bit different take on that, where the county or whatever area that would be in was saying that water would have hit the roof, it would have run down your gutters and would have made it into a stream, and that stream would have finally pooled into a lake or a river, which then we as the state or county municipality could have charged a fee for a farmer to use that water. And by collecting that 50 gallons off your roof, you're stealing from the state's revenue base. Mm-hmm. And that was at least one of the reasons in Oregon they were given. So yeah, look how many excuses there are. So you can't collect your water. It's poisonous. Oh no, it's a state revenue base. Oh, what is it next?
Yeah. Then really what happens, David, when there's not enough resources to produce the food? We're kind of cut off from the water, or it's maybe not so much cut off, but tapped out at a certain point, or there's not enough people to process the food. I mean, how long until it's here in our front yard? I mean, Germany right now is warning of food shortages, both frozen and fresh produce, because of the rising energy cost. But then what happens when the energy crisis hits here? Because it's going to be hit with some kind of hyperinflation, And then there's also a lack of product as well. That's a real recipe for disaster. So what's your timeline of events? How long do you think it's going to be before we see this in our face in the United States?
April 2023-ish. And this whole misnomer that we could have a resource shortage that's something of fiction that has been programmed into our mind to allow corporations to charge you higher prices. The only reason that there could possibly be a resource shortage is laws passed so you do not have access to those resources, which would be otherwise guaranteed to you under God, our planet. How many times have you ever been on an airplane and flown over the United States? Anybody out there flown over Canada? There is so much open land, so much underutilized land. It is shocking how wide open America is alone. And then heaven forbid, you fly over Canada going over to Asia, because it is like just 3 or 4 hours of straight tundra, farmlands, nature, forests, lakes, and rivers, and you might be lucky to see a house down there. This whole misnomer of, there's all these shortages, we are humans, no, that is controlled bottlenecking of resources under the guise of a shortage. Because you look, the earth's so bountiful and so plentiful. Any of you who ever grown a garden, you know how much your gardens can produce. Like, wow, way more than you could eat for a family. Now multiply that by everybody's backyards, and it's the point of distribution and manufacture that's falsely creating shortages. Who adjusts this supply and demand on a whim here? We're seeing it right now in a real play. If one thing I could hope in this dark chapter of history that's unfolding right now is that it wakes everybody up to, you understand there's no free market. Everything is coordinated. There's no organic events happening. The shortages are turned on and off like a light switch. So is the value of your money. So is your unemployment or your employment, your access to job, money, food, energy. It's all completely controlled. And you understand the control device is in your face, happening so fast, they're not even trying to mask it anymore, that there was some freedom of market or open markets. It's just like, we're going to turn it off. And you're seeing it happen in real time. I really hope humanity does wake up. And if we have to go through this kind of dark phase, so it will awaken people that nothing that you think, and it's all an illusion, and the illusion comes crumbling down, and you see that everything that has been in the last 100 years, nothing has been real in terms of event-wise. It's all planned. Everything we see, from crashes of economies, famines. If there's a famine because of just the Black Sea being blocked off, then that's an event, because they could unblock it just as quickly. So even when you see Russia, the bad guy, America, the Britons over here, the Germans there, the Poles here, everybody's fighting everybody. No, they're not. Are they really? Or is this just as an excuse as a global body of governance to explain away the food shortages, so no government gets taken out by angry citizens because they're starving? It's always point the finger elsewhere. It's not the sun. It's not that cycle back here again. I really, thought I was on the edge of, thinking, and not, but really this last year, especially with the grains and stuff, has really kind of just twisted my perception quite a bit, more than ever since I've been alive. Going to India was one thing, and getting my brain ripped out of the top of my head on just, whoa, I was fed complete. Everything I ever knew about international aid organizations and all these sort of things, I just realized everything I knew up to that point when I was in my 20s was a lie, the way that the world had functioned. Now, this last 1 year has gone India 2.0 and ripped the other side of my brain out in terms of truly how controlled it is. I knew there was control in the mechanism out there, but I didn't realize the level of it. I mean, it is all encompassing. Nothing, from the markets to the availability of water, nothing is as it seems. And Ryder, you could go on way deeper than I can, because you're well versed in that. And I watch, you try to explain these difficult topics as well, but you make it so easy to understand. And you're like, bam, bam, bam. I'm still struggling to find a word over here to describe it, but you're already like 6 paragraphs deep,
Yeah, I try, and sometimes I wish I could get more detailed about it and go into depth, but it's difficult really to explain, because everything is a cover up within a cover up, right? Every single topic that I thought that I knew about, just like you, from 5 to 6 years ago, has completely been flipped on its head because they have to put out a cover to hide what they're really doing, right? And everything is a cover, right? But they've gotten everyone so bought in to the cover that they think that the cover is the cover. Right. And they're, I don't know, I'm definitely not explaining that in the most proper way ever. But really, when you look at any topics, any of the topics that I cover here on this show, from spirituality to aliens to ETs to the secret space program to mind control and all that, whenever you go dig down deep through it, like, you realize what's really going on. And I think, and I 100% believe that it's, you were speaking about this before we jumped on, that you believe that it might be like an outside source that's kind of doing this, and maybe an inhuman source. But I really think that it's just corrupt humans. I believe on a fundamental level that it is corrupt humans. Now, whether those humans have been corrupted from a outside source is highly plausible, but I think that this is a human problem. It's a human issue, and we've let these people have control over our lives, and no one has done anything about it, and it's just continuously perpetuated itself over and over and over and over again, right? And then this is where we really find ourselves. We find ourselves in this predicament because we sat back and we kind of let it happen. And I really honestly believe, and that's not something that people want to hear, right? They don't want to hear that we have let this happen, but I honestly believe that it is, a lot of it has been our fault. We've let it get to this point, and now whatever happens, is happening according to the plan. And that's a very difficult and a hard pill to swallow. And that's not me saying that there isn't any outside manipulations, because there obviously is outside manipulations. But really, it's exactly what you were talking about with the Bugs Life movie, right? We outnumber them, we outpower them, and I think really the way that we do that is with our consciousness and with our beliefs and our ideas backing it, right? Because they have us locked into this control matrix, this control system that they've created through the television, through through the movies, through the predictive programming, through the music, and it's gotten our subconscious mind wired on a shitty level, right? To where we can't see any way out of the predicament that we found ourselves in, when really we can, right? If you're constantly buying into somebody else's reality, then you're going to be living that reality, I believe, anyway. So if you're constantly watching the news and you're listening to all the propaganda, you're watching TV, you're doing all these things, then that's the type of reality that you're getting, because your subconscious mind is being programmed subtly by all of those images and all of those colors. I mean, they figured that out with the MK Ultra mind control stuff on an individual level. And the real goal from the beginning with the MK Ultra on a individual level was to expand that out, to do it to everybody all at once, to control the population massively. Right. And once they figured out that they can control people's minds through trauma, that's what all these events are for, right? The big mass events is a collective traumatization upon the public. So then they can program in certain words, certain phrases, certain colors, certain images to get them triggered back to that event. I mean, if you look at it, that's the exact way that it's gone. I mean, if you look at 9/11, right? A terrorist event. Right now, what is it? Now it's domestic terrorism. They still have terrorism in the title. They've just flipped it on us, right? And it used to be about an enemy outside of us. Now we are the enemy. They've flipped that again. Right. So when you look at all these events as a collective traumatization to get away with a certain narrative that on under normal circumstances wouldn't be gotten away with, then you start to see through the veil. Sorry, I kind of rambled on there a little bit.
No, and I could continue and dovetail on that for, even if you, whatever religious affiliation you might be, if you go into the Arabic writings or you go into Christian writings, or they talk about the further we swing away from being in touch with divinity and living in harmony with light, the more this, they even call it the jinn, is what the Arabic traditions talk about, that it swings in and you give it an inch and it takes a mile. And there's this battle back and forth between in history that's been talked about time immemorial, where the populace steps away from being in harmony with the creator itself. And because of that, that darker power is able to overtake into some sort of dimensionality or mind of the persons inhabiting the planet. And it doesn't matter what continent you're on or which religious belief you were or what, because before these religions, go back pre-Buddhism, it was still paganism, speaking of October and worshiping the earth and getting back into these divine energies. But at some point, there was a few breaks in that too. Go back into the Sumerians and Babylonians, like they stepped away from living in harmony. And, you hear some of these stories about, well, I can't really say it on the programs here, but that same force, whatever it is, there's many names through history. So many cultures have names for that dark force that's able to step in when we go away from any sort of balance. And again, and then it'll swing, the pendulum will swing over to everybody, you'll see it, and then suddenly everybody reverts back over to, all right, we need to get in harmony again. And then it is, and then whoosh, that darkness literally can't hold state anymore. There's nowhere for it to be because we're back in harmony again. Looking back from say Babylonian or Sumerian traditions forward, especially when you get into the Hittite era, say 5,000 years prior, they were worshiping the magic mushroom as their source of divinity and inspiration and touching with the rocks and getting down, Petra in that desert area, bringing it to bloom to life, living in harmony with that. And then suddenly what the Assyrians are in there and everybody's conquering everybody else. Like, what's going on with this flow of light and dark in between these ancient ages of history? And what about prehistory as well? We got the Homo sapiens sapien, which we are now. And then me and Ryder before the show, we're talking, excuse me, a little bit about like the creation of a new human. But if we got the Homo sapiens sapien now, is the timeline really correct on where we got defined as a Homo sapiens sapien from a Neanderthal and then from the Denisovans? And then what was pre-Denisovan, because there's that last 10,000 years of warmth in the Ice Age, between Ice Ages, say 110,000, 118,000 years ago. And you can go back to these different epochs in history of this warmth period between Ice Ages. But then we kind of just stopped counting sort of like new prototype humans from the Denisovans. Then we got the Neanderthal. Now we got us. So really, like, how far has this gone back and how much has these control mechanism been in play? A million years, 400,000 years, only the last 10,000? I mean, really, where does it sit? And do we even know the true prehistory or the history of our own human race? Yeah, you can go as deep as you want on it, but I'm just focused right here, right now, getting on my garden. So I'm not going to be reliant on a centralized delivery system, collecting my own water, getting filters and separation tanks ready for that water, and being able to move into more of a self-sufficient existence while things break down around. Now, the security aspect, I need more people on my farm because I know what's coming. And you can't be up 24 hours a day. And I really don't want to pull triggers. I really don't. I really do not want to do that. But if you're going to protect, and they're coming in to take you and get you out of your house. And when they do, they're going to, once they try to get into your house, this is a security aspect thing. There's one special forces guy, retired guy, was in Vietnam. He's one of my neighbors. And he's like, because then he worked for the police, and he was saying in a home invasion or some of these types of societal breakdowns, if they're able to get into your place, your chance of survival living through that is 15%. Because if they're coming in to take your stores of food and they're coming in to get your house and they're coming in to get whatever's in there, the chance of them leaving you unmolested, let's say, and allowing you to come back at them because you're so angry and vindictive of what they did to you, the chances of them even letting you live through that event, 15%. So then you look at these statistics and you read more about Somalia, because Craig Simpson over at Rating Creators was over in Somalia as well. And he was telling me all about the breakdowns and all about how these gangs form, and all these things of just like there's protection in numbers. And the reason I said that is going back in prehistory, we only survived in villages. That's the only possible way. There was like no lone wolf running around out there. This whole thing of like solo trekking, and, we have these, glorified ideas. I'm going to solo trek through the Himalaya, man. You would have gotten eaten, killed, or kidnapped back in the day. So nobody did that. You traveled in pairs. You traveled in tens. Villages always had 200 people. You locked everything up at night, tight as a drum, because there were things that went bump in the night out there. And I mean, I don't care where we're going in history, but we're right back at a repeating cycle of it. And I think a lot of things that allowed humanity to survive, we're going to have to relearn those again and bring them into fast forward. I need Ryder, I need 2 quarters so I can get into a time machine and bring myself right up to now. And I can also visit the past to learn what I need to learn to survive right now. So can I borrow some change?
Yeah.
The time machine requires quarters.
We got to build the time machine first. And you get some of that Tesla technology to build that bad boy. But it's interesting you're talking about these cycles, right? I have this theory that nothing is meant to be permanent here, because you're talking about these. If you look back through all the different ages of humanity and these different time periods, I don't know about you, but I believe that we were 100% highly advanced civilization multiple times throughout our history, right? And why aren't we advanced now? I think that it has something to do with the cycles and the time, because I believe that it works as a duality and a polarity, just like the duality and the polarity works on an individual level here. It also works on the grand scheme of things here. So in each one of these ages, we flip back and forth. It's like an up and down roller coaster. Sometimes we get the knowledge is freely given and it's not suppressed like it's been in this age, and we get to be highly advanced civilization. We get to live as free as possible that we can possibly live here. And then once that age is through, that whole thing collapses, and then we get a dark age. Right? But I think that the problem is here, David, is that the controllers and the manipulators of our reality in this age is trying to just run right through the next stage. And they're trying to hijack the next stage where we're supposed to be, things are supposed to be open and free, and we have this knowledge that's freely given, and we live in a more harmonious world. They're trying to hijack this next age of Aquarius, and they're trying to push right through that so that they get another 2,000 years, 5,000 years, or 10,000 years. There's discrepancies on how long that people say an age actually lasts for. They're trying to just run right through that age, get to the next dark age, so that they can permanently try and cement this technocratic surveillance kind of state here for the next thousands and thousands of years. And I think that that's really what's going on. We're supposed to flip back to this, what I've termed a God age. Right? The God age is supposed to be next, but they're doing their damnedest to try and hijack that age and run right over it and push right through it so that they can take their darkness on through the next stage. What do you think?
Well, again, you come back to higher powers that are so much more powerful, and like in orders of magnitude, you can't even think of a number that's high enough that the creator of this, even if you just want to stay in the third dimensional realms of stars and galaxies, and something that is that intelligent to have a base layer of consciousness holding it all together that vibrates in light, to have that blueprint for the actual dimension that we exist in, to hold it in time, space, and expand and allow the creation of how many countless different beings and those with conscience, sentient thought across all these galaxies, hundreds of trillions of galaxies. The numbers themselves don't even make sense. And then you got hundreds of billions of stars in these guys. There's a base layer that holds that all together. Now, the architect of that, and these bozos over here think that they can put up a 5G tower that's going to stop the sweeping of waves of galactic energy that are going to do these upgrades that have time immemorial. And I think a lot of it has to do with where we sit in the spiral arm of our galaxy, and then energies that we transit through. Like they're always there and they're always in place, whether it be a denser plasma with faster heating, or whether it be sort of, I hate to say empty space because there is no such thing, but an area where the plasma density is less, where there's slower vibrating energies. And sometimes you come into dense spaces where there's actual physical debris there along with the plasmas. But the energy signatures through those areas of space have been mapped out in what they call astrology. The astronomy part of it was to explain where we were in the heavens moving around through, which, like Aquarius or Leo or whatnot. But the energy involved in that Birkeland current flow, that flow of energy that we actually transit through, is almost like passing through a copper wire that's more highly electrified or lower on the current flow. And those are all explained in terms of Western astrology, but then you got the Vedic astrologies, and then you can go over to, the Yuga cycles, which you're referencing. I think a little bit of that, but just the sheer arrogance of these so-called elite to think that they can put up a 5G network to try to stop that enhanced waves coming through that are just the normal ebb and flow of our planet, our star system, otherwise known as our solar system. I mean, that's just insane talk to even think. This is where it comes back into some biblical references. And even if you believe in sinking continents such as Atlantis, something similar, though. They got too incredibly arrogant for their technologies, which was their demise. And I believe that this will be another one of those. They may think that they could control these energies, but they cannot. That the creator is so much more powerful. It's unfathomable or unfathomable how you can even put a context on something like that, to even compare it to just a bunch of people up working at a tech company that have some woo-woo technology. I mean, literally, the base layer vibration to hold all dimensional space together, that creation, and you think somehow you're going to put a tower up and that's going to stop that flow of not only information, but consciousness in itself. Like, that's insanity. That is truly the definition of insanity there. So perhaps we do get into these cycles of insanity where the rulers think that their tech is going to be something almighty, when really, I mean, in the scheme of things, it's truly nothing.
What if
except our connection back to source again. That's the...
Yeah, what if that's what they're trying to accomplish?
That's what they are trying to accomplish. But I'm just saying, I'm so hopeful and just understanding the workings. If I even have an understanding of the workings, I know nothing, but I still have an inkling of understanding of what this creation is. That gives me hope that their plans on this tech side of physically made, man-made objects is no match at all in any way, shape, or form for anything that's coming back from the consciousness of creation itself.
Yeah, I would think that cutting your spirituality off now, whatever that spirituality is, whether it's religion, because religion is spiritual, and in a way, if you could cut that spirituality off, which makes me think that that might be what these towers are kind of designed to do. It might not be so much that is preventing something from coming, but it's actually preventing us from leaving. It's like trapping us here in some sort of different way. I don't know, that sounds kind of woo-woo, but we're on the woo-woo topic right now. So I think it's because I don't think that they would do it for absolutely no reason. And a lot of times you have to invert things and look at things backwards and from the other side of like what, kind of what they're saying or what the general consensus of something actually is. So if you look at it as like cutting us off from a source or somehow preventing us from leaving, then it kind of makes a little more sense there. I don't know.
You'd have to have a substance in the body that would actually turn the antenna receiver off in a certain segment of your brain. And I just today, somebody sent me a video and go, Dave, check this out here. This thermal imaging. So I'm into thermal imaging because I just enjoy looking at it. And in the evenings, checking out the farm, different animals and things around. But the whole video was about going through an airport, and somebody was standing behind one of these thermal imaging screens that they were showing the glowing of the luciferase that was injected into people, glowing in. And they were saying, they were trying to explain it like, all right, you're in an airport, it's loaded full of frequency, like it's a frequency hotspot. That's why people feel so excited when they're traveling, because they're going through all these frequency hotspots. But those elements within the body would start vibrating on a different gigahertz frequency that would become visible. So going through these, standing scanner X-ray machines or whatever, and with thermal imaging, they were able to see the glow in the arm or in the forehead. And I thought that was the most interesting thing, because this person was in the Republic of Georgia, and they all had their COVID passes, and they went to go through, and they're like, nope, that's a fake one. You absolutely do not have that in your body. And they're like, no, this is from a doctor. We got it. And they're like, no, you're not leaving the airport until you get that injection. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We already got that. Here's the card. Call the doctor. And they're like, no, you don't. You don't have that in your body. And that's how they were able to see it. Now I'm starting to think like that would be a way to cut it off. But just like, somebody who didn't put that in their body walking through, there's still going to be some connection. That wire cut or that antenna cutting, could only happen if there was something injected into the human.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. Some kind of thermal imaging
Yeah.
scanner to see if you've actually had the thing or not.
Now let me go deeper with you on that. The whole question posed in the video was, after 9/11 and we started to get all those body scanners and everything, were those the same body scanners that can read whether you have the luciferase inside you, or is this new scanners that were recently installed in airports in, say, the last 2 to 3 years? Or is it the same tech and all they do is change the frequency to measure different elements within the body? And if it had been, and they had started setting this up in 2001, then everything that we know, this is a real deep plan, because it would have been 20 years in the making to get those body scanners and get you accustomed walking through them, versus putting something brand new in the last 1 or 2 years. So this is a whole series of studies now is running up, trying to go to all these airports to see, are these brand new scanners 1 to 2 years old, or are they older ones that were 5-10 years old, still functional, that all they did was tweak the wave and they tweaked the frequency to be able to see what's inside there in your body. And they boiled it down so succinctly, and they're like, yeah, they're paying some dude or some lady 60 grand a year to sit in front of a computer screen, thermal imaging, and go, is there red or is there green or is there orange in the person? If they're not, you pull them to the side over here.
Wow.
Those are the different colors that they were seeing. That was crazy. It was like green streaks down the arms and like super glowing in the head. And it was so visible. It was actually spooky watching that thing, that they tweaked it enough where they could to actually see the substance with a frequency wave, that it would start to glow in your body. They marked everybody, and they can clearly see who didn't have it. And those 3 people are still in jail in Republic of Georgia, in the airport, no less, until they receive the jabba dabba do. They won't let them out. They won't let them out. And that's scary.
That is really scary. That's insane. Wow. Yeah. Imagine if they put those everywhere. You wouldn't be able to go in anywhere or do any. Imagine that in front of a grocery store.
That's exactly right. And then what the next thing they were doing is they brought that up, as a matter of fact, going into malls, grocery stores, banks, and the whole thing about you need to get a new text message. Like if you're going to do something online, it'll say, oh, send a text message to verify that it's you. And, what if you don't have your thing up to date, then they turn off your phone. Then you can't get any text messages from any of the service providers. So you can't even access your money. But what they did talk about that, in addition to the banks, was, you know how you see people with the thermal things, and originally they were shooting at the forehead, and then people got angry at that, and they started, shooting it at the hand to check body temperatures. So they were asking, with all these thermal imaging devices, and they've seen a lot more people with actual thermal imagers now at temperature check places. So is that going to be the thing, like they were taking your temperature on the forehead or whatever before you could go into Walmart back in 2020, mid 2020 or early 2021? Is this going to now be using different, just off the shelf thermal imaging equipment to see if you have that in your body or not? That's where they actually went with the conversation on this. I'm enthralled by it. I'd never thought about any of this either. My mind, again, blown open completely today. I got to get you, Ryder, of all people, the guy's name, and let you watch this interview. I was shocked. Like, what in the? You just, well, I thought I knew. Oh, it ripped me again. Like, that was a mind bender there.
Wow, that is.
How deep does it really go back? If it was from right after 9/11 with the body scanners, man, we have been played left, right, and center versus having brand new scanners that pick that up.
See, I thought maybe in the beginning it would be something like a wristband or something that you had to permanently wear to be able, kind of like Songbird. I don't know if you saw that a movie that came out. Michael Bay directed it, Songbird, where it was something that very similar that happened in 2020 here. There was a movie made about it, and everyone had to have a wristband permanently around their arm to get into anywhere. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's some predictive programming. They'll do like some kind of wristband thing. And then I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do that in the United States. But they did kind of do it, but they did it on the phone, right? They did it with the QR codes. And that started, I think, in Australia and then in the UK, and then it's kind of a thing here now. But I did not see the thermal imaging thing coming. That's a whole other level. That's wild. Wow.
Bizarro land.
Well, David, thank you so much,
Yeah,
brother, for
thanks.
coming
Been an
on.
interesting conversation. Yeah, I'll send you the link to that and everybody out there so you can pass it along.
Yes. Really quick before I go, let you go. I know we're running over here a little bit, but I've enjoyed talking to you a lot. Is there a few things that you kind of already spoke about it in the beginning of the show and what you're doing to prepare? Is there any quick advice that you could give to help people to try and get through this period of time that's coming, because it's coming no matter what. I 100% believe these events just don't happen for no reason. You know, it's a planned collapse. They're getting ready to collapse it now. When that happens, full fledged, not 100% sure, but it is coming before 2030. I 100% believe. So, is there any tips that you could give anybody to help them get through this period of time and survive? Because I think that that's going to be the most important thing that we can do is survive.
Understanding what's about to happen and what is in flow right now, to mentally adjust to it first before you can assess even where you sit. And then having these difficult conversations with family members, because even 2 months ago or 5, 6 months ago, to have the same conversation with like an entrenched family member that's just bought the Kool-Aid and drank that whole bottle, things are so out of kilter now that they're willing to have the conversations because nothing is as it seems. And the world has spun so far off base that even the most staunch believers in things were okay have now really started to say, whoa, you know, things just don't look right anymore. So the willingness to have the conversation, and then to get at least close family members, neighbors, groups of people on the same page to even understand where you're going to need to take action. See, that's the biggest thing. Like, I could sit here all day and grow a garden and just twiddle my thumbs, like, I don't care whatever people think. I'm going to filter my own water and I'm going to get my eggs from my chickens. And hey, forget. That's really not going to work in the real world. You're going to have people all around you all the time for so many chores and all these things. And you can only do so much. You can only produce so much. And everybody's got a skill. And I would absolutely like do cross interviews with people to see what kind of skills they have. Because I was watching a video, super interesting story. Woman comes up and, you know, after she heard a speaker was like, I don't know how to do anything. I was like, I got no skills to offer anybody. And guy was super cool and was like, just sit down with me for a second. I know you got skills. You're in your 60s. Of course you got skills. And she's like, what'd you do? Well, I was a mother, you know. And so, oh, you ran a kitchen. Perfect. You're going to be in charge of all of our canning. You're going to be the one who's going to get all the jars clean. You're going to, yeah, and you're going to teach. You're going to be the teacher for everybody else in the community here on how to can. And just like instantly assigned a role of like skills of having what every mother had of raising children, of having to prepare foods, clean up, get recipes together and this sort of thing. And it was an instantly from like a completely hopeless moment to, wow, I really got a skill that everybody will be super, super stoked to have. And this is what really it is, like taking a skills assessment of everybody around you. Like, oh, I worked as a doctor, as an intern for like one summer in Doctors Without Borders. Oh, you're coming with us. What was 20 years ago? I don't care, man. Needles and thread and gauze have been the same for 200 years. You're coming with us. You know, it's always about skill assessment of anybody that's out there. Because, talk about the gardening and the filtering water. Oh, okay, everybody's got to do that. But now what skills can you bring in as more of a cohesive unit? And like emergency preparedness in terms of what does happen if somebody gets hurt medically. Because we've had some injuries on the farm out here, and you burn through your huge amount of your med stuff real fast, especially burns. Burns. All I can say is burn kit. You definitely don't have enough stuff. You never will. And you need to practice what happens when somebody gets burned. A, they're taken out of the equation for days, if not weeks. B, that infection is going to come screaming into the hands or feet or body if you don't have that under control, especially in sort of a grid down where hygiene's going to be iffy at best. Like, what are you going to sacrifice to keep that? You got to pre-advance practice some of these things, and going through some burn sessions and seeing burns myself. Oh my gosh. What happens if you break your foot, your arm, your leg? What if you slice off your thumb? What happens to all these things? And like, these are real farm injuries. You do more real farm work, you're going to get hurt way, way more. Like, I just had a hand side because I was clearing. I sliced into my foot. I had to go get stitches. Now, what if there was no doctor? And okay, we got a stitch kit, but could I have cleaned it well enough? Would have gotten infected? I mean, there's all these types of things that, easy for us to run down to an emergency clinic, pay your $80 and get your stitches and get out of there. $100, whatever it is, but to actually do it on your own. I mean, do we have enough Novocaine? Nope, probably not. Do we got enough whiskey? Yeah. And I'm like 1800s biting the belts, or I mean, all kind of weird things to think about. We need to do a skills assessment first, and then really go through the spreadsheet and try to get what things you have under your belt already, and then what preps you're going to need, and really do like a super deep assessment. Anything doesn't work or half works, half correct, just throw it away and get a brand new one. So, looking through the longevity of this, you're going to have to go 10, 15 years with completely broken down supply chains. So do I want like a solar charger that only charges 50% when I could buy a new one for $30 or something? No, I'm throwing that old one away, just getting rid of it completely. And I'm getting a brand new one, or two or three. And really, start taking a good deep, cataloging of what you have around the place, what might you need, and then start going out to get that, not today, yesterday, because it's already too late tomorrow. I mean, that's kind of an off thing. Most people say, yeah, grow food, get seeds, and everything. But, I'm thinking a little bit differently now that I got the seeds and the tools and all that stuff stocked away. Now what? Well, I need skills is what I need. I need people out here to live with me. I need people living out on the land. I need people to share the skills, and then so we can cross-pollinate ideas is what I need. Need about 15 more people out here.
Well, if you need anyone to come and teach a meditation class and breathwork class on spirituality, I'll be there, brother.
Well, we got some yurts out in the back forest if you're willing to live with the Sasquatch part of the year.
Oh, yeah, give me some yurts. There's a huge yurt farm right up here in Colorado where I'm at. Yeah.
Yeah, yurts are cool too. We're trying to put it in like really cool parts of the forest too. So you do want to be there. You do want to have your own like forest park by yourself, just because we're cutting out a lot of the underbrush and, exposing some of the waterfalls that are on the property. They flow when it rains, but just having some cool topographical features that you can go chill next to, making little paths all over the place. So you really want to be there. You want to be out in nature, but you want to make it just, a 3-minute walk down the hill to get back to the main house for dinner and stuff. So we're yurts with the foundation, wooden foundations, decks, that sort of thing, making it a little nice. Instead of living in a bamboo hut with no electricity, you want to have at least, some comfort, because if you're going to be working and living, you're going to want comfort.
Oh, I thought you said yurts. I thought you said yaks. That's why I said a yak farm, because there's a yak
yurts
farm.
And yaks, man, they go hand in hand. Are you kidding me?
Yurts and yaks all day, baby.
It's too warm for yaks down here, unfortunately. I can get you a water buffalo. It's about as close as I can get.
Perfect. I'll take a water buffalo. David, thanks so much for coming on my show. Let people know where they can find you online, brother.
Brighteon.tv every Friday, 2 to 3 p.m. And also the YouTube channel, Adapt 2030, and Many Ice Age Conversations podcast.
All of David's information will be in the description of this video. If you want to know what's going on in the world, I highly recommend you subscribe and to both of his channels, Mini Ice Age Conversations and Adapt 2030.
And Raised by Giants on your checklist.
That's right. Thanks so much, David. Appreciate you a lot. For everyone else, Thanks for watching and listening. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel out in the YouTube algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. The link to my channel on Rokfin is in the description. Sign up over there. Hit the follow button for my premium content. And you can catch this episode and any of my other episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and download them individually to your device for free on Spreaker.com. Thanks again so much, David. I appreciate you a lot. I'll bring you back on in sometime in 2023 so we can reassess the situation and see everything that's happened.
Thanks for that, Ryder. I'll see you then.
And remember, we're not only in a spiritual war, but a war on humanity. Stay aware, stay alert, keep loving your heart for everyone, stay safe out there. And if you can see through the illusion, you are the solution. See you guys next time.